You actually live here? My sister Rebecca's voice dripped with disdain as she surveyed my 600 square foot apartment. Emma, this place is barely bigger than my walk-in closet. I took a slow breath, reminding myself that I'd invited her over for a reason. It's all I need. Besides, the rent is reasonable, and I'm saving money. Saving for what? She laughed, running a manicured finger along my IKEA bookshelf. A slightly larger box. Meanwhile, I'm living in Grandma Rose's mansion for free, enjoying life as it should be lived. The mention of our grandmother's estate made my stomach clench, but I kept my face neutral. How is the old place? Still as beautiful as ever. Of course, Rebecca preened. I've redecorated most of the rooms. That stuffy Victorian style was so dated. You should see what I've done with Grandma's library. Converted it into the most amazing yoga studio. My heart stopped. He got rid of the books. Please, nobody reads actual books anymore. Everything's digital now. She waved her hand dismissively. Besides, it's basically my house now. Mom and Dad made me property manager after Grandma Rose went into the nursing home, so I can do whatever I want with it. I bit my tongue hard. Rebecca had no idea that every change she'd made to our grandmother's beloved home had been carefully photographed and documented. Every improvement she'd bragged about on social media had been saved and filed away. All evidence for what was coming next. Actually, I said carefully, that's why I asked you over today. We need to talk about the estate. Rebecca rolled her eyes, dropping onto my small sofa. There's nothing to talk about. Grandma Rose left everything to Mom and Dad, and they put me in charge. End of story. That's not exactly accurate. I pulled an envelope from my desk drawer. Grandma didn't leave everything to Mom and Dad. She left most of it to me. Rebecca's perfectly sculpted eyebrows shot up. Then she burst out laughing. Oh, that's rich. You? The perpetual student who can barely afford this shoebox? Why would Grandma leave you anything? Because I was the only one who visited her regularly in the nursing home, I said quietly. The only one who read to her from her beloved books. The only one who noticed when her mind was still sharp, but her body was failing. She had dementia, Rebecca scoffed. Everyone knew that. No, she had a rare neurological condition that affected her mobility and speech. But her mind was clear until the end. Clear enough to make legal decisions about her estate. Rebecca's smile faded slightly. What are you talking about? I pulled the documents from the envelope. 3 years ago, before she moved to the nursing home, Grandma Rose transferred ownership of the estate to me. The house, the grounds, everything. It's all in my name. That's impossible, Rebecca whispered, but I could see fear creeping into her eyes. Mom and Dad would have told me. They don't know, I explained. Grandma asked me to keep it quiet until after she passed. She wanted to see who would take care of her and the estate out of love, not obligation or greed. You're lying. Rebecca jumped up, her face flushed. Show me those papers. I handed them over, watching as she scanned the legal documents, her face growing paler with each page. Property deeds, transfer records, tax documents, all legally registered in my name. This can't be real, she stammered. I've been living there, managing the property. Without my permission or knowledge of how you were changing Grandma's home, I finished. The home she specifically wanted preserved as she left it. Rebecca's hands were shaking now. Does this mean? It means you've been living in my house for 3 years, I said calmly, making unauthorized changes to my property, and you haven't paid a penny in rent. She collapsed back onto the sofa, the papers scattered around her. Why didn't you say anything? Why let me stay there all this time? Because Grandma asked me to wait. She wanted to see who would respect her home and her wishes, and who would treat it like their personal playground. I pulled out another document, a detailed account of every change Rebecca had made to the house, complete with before and after photos. The antique furniture you sold, those were family heirlooms meant to stay in the house. The library you destroyed, those first editions were worth more than your yoga equipment. The rose garden you paved over for a parking pad. Grandma's great-grandmother planted those bushes. Rebecca's face had gone from pale to ashen. I can fix it. Put things back the way they were. Some things can't be fixed, I said, thinking of the irreplaceable books, the century-old roses, the family pieces scattered to unknown buyers. But you're right about one thing. Everything's documented in great detail. What does that mean? It means you have two options. I pulled out the final document, one my lawyer had prepared months ago. Option 1. You can sign this agreement to pay back rent for the past 3 years, plus compensation for the items you sold or destroyed. You'll need to move out within 30 days, and I'll take possession of my property. Rebecca swallowed hard. And option 2. I file a civil suit for damages and unauthorized use of property. Given the documentation I have, my lawyer estimates it would be a very expensive case for you to lose. You'd sue your own sister. Her voice cracked. You redecorated your own sister's house without permission. I countered. Sold her inheritance piece by piece. Destroyed irreplaceable family treasures. What's worse? Rebecca stared at the papers scattered across her lap, then looked around my small apartment with new eyes. You've known for 3 years that you own the estate. Why live here? Why live like this when you could have had the mansion? Because I wanted to earn my own way, I explained. Build my own life. The estate was Grandma's gift to me, but she taught me that true wealth isn't about living in a big house or having expensive things. It's about integrity, responsibility, and respect for family history. Things I clearly know nothing about, Rebecca said bitterly. No, I agreed, you don't, but Grandma gave you 3 years to learn. Time to show who you really are when you think no one's watching. Time to demonstrate how you treat a family legacy. I gestured at the documents. You failed the test, Rebecca, spectacularly. Now you have to face the consequences. She picked up the agreement with trembling hands. How much is the back rent? Market rate for a property of that size in that location, I said, plus interest, and compensation for the items you sold or destroyed, based on professional appraisals of their value. When she saw the total, she made a sound like she'd been punched in the gut. I can't afford this. It would take years to pay it all back. Yes, I said simply. It will. You should have thought of that before you started selling off pieces of our family history to fund your lifestyle. Rebecca's face crumpled, tears smearing her perfect makeup. What am I supposed to do? Where am I supposed to go? I let the question hang in the air for a moment, remembering all the times she'd mocked my small apartment, my modest lifestyle, my choice to live within my means while building my own career. All while she'd been living rent-free in a house that wasn't hers, selling off our family's treasures piece by piece. But as I opened my mouth to respond, my phone buzzed with an incoming text. The message made my blood run cold. It was from our mother. Just got a call from the nursing home. It's about Grandma Rose. We need to talk. Now. Little did I know, Grandma's final revelation about the estate was just the beginning. She had one last test for our family, one that would force us all to confront painful truths about ourselves and each other. The nursing home's family conference room felt too small for the tension it contained. Mom sat rigid in her chair, hands clasped tight in her lap. Dad stared out the window, his jaw clenched. Rebecca huddled in the corner, still shaken from our earlier conversation. And I waited. Ms. Chen, Grandma Rose's attorney, cleared her throat. Thank you all for coming so quickly. As you know, Mrs. Rose Mitchell passed away peacefully this morning. Despite knowing this was coming, the words hit like a physical blow. I'd visited Grandma just yesterday, reading to her from her favorite Jane Austen novel. She'd squeezed my hand when I left, her eyes saying what her voice no longer could. She'd known. She'd been saying goodbye. Before we discussed the will, Ms. Chen continued, Mrs. Mitchell left specific instructions about a video to be played for her family immediately after her passing. She placed a laptop on the table, and suddenly Grandma Rose appeared on the screen. The video had been recorded 3 years ago, just before she'd moved to the nursing home. She sat in her beloved library, surrounded by the books Rebecca had since discarded. My darlings, Grandma began, her voice strong and clear, so different from the whispers of her final days. If you're watching this, I've finally left this world. But before you deal with what I've left behind, we need to discuss how you've handled what I entrusted to you while I was alive. Mom shifted uncomfortably. Dad's shoulders tense. 3 years ago, I devised a test. Grandma continued. I transferred ownership of my estate to Emma, but kept it secret. I wanted to see how each of you would treat my home, my possessions, and most importantly, each other, when you thought the house belonged to the family trust. Rebecca made a small choked sound. Robert, Diana, Grandma addressed our parents. I told you I'd left everything to you, knowing you put Rebecca in charge of the property. I wanted to see if you check on things yourselves or simply trust that everything was being handled properly. Mom's face had gone pale. We thought. You thought it was easier to let Rebecca handle everything. Grandma's voice was gentle but firm. You didn't want to risk conflict by questioning her decisions. But true love means caring enough to ask difficult questions, to step in when someone is making mistakes. Dad finally turned from the window, his expression haunted. Rebecca, Grandma's eyes seemed to look right through the screen. I gave you the chance to prove yourself a worthy steward of our family's heritage. Instead, you treated my home like a disposable asset, selling pieces of our history to fund a lifestyle you hadn't earned. Rebecca began to cry softly. And Emma, Grandma's face softened. You watched it all happen, documenting everything but never acting out of spite or revenge. You lived modestly when you could have claimed your rightful property. You visited me faithfully, not for my money, but for my company. You proved yourself in ways I hoped you would. I felt tears running down my own cheeks. But this test wasn't just about the house, Grandma continued. It was about understanding the true value of family legacy, not the furniture or the books or even the building itself, but the values those things represent. History, responsibility, love. She leaned forward in her chair. Which brings me to my final test. Emma, as the legal owner of the estate, you have every right to evict your sister and demand compensation. The question is, what will you do with that power? The video ended, leaving us in stunned silence. Ms. Chen pulled out a thick envelope. Mrs. Mitchell left additional instructions and documents to be opened after the video. Should I proceed? I held up my hand. Wait. I need to say something first. Everyone turned to look at me. Rebecca, I said softly, how much were you selling the books for? She blinked in confusion. What? The books from the library. How much did you get for them? I don't know exactly. Maybe $50,000 total. Some of them went to rare book dealers. And the furniture? She swallowed hard. Another $75,000 or so. The roses you paved over were heritage varieties, I said. Irreplaceable. But the rest we can fix. Mom leaned forward. Emma, what are you saying? I took a deep breath. I'm saying I don't want the back rent or compensation. What I want is to restore Grandma's house to what it was meant to be, a home, a repository of family history, a place where future generations can understand where they came from. Rebecca stared at me. But how? You're going to help me, I said. Every penny you made selling Grandma's things, that's your starting contribution to the restoration fund. You'll help me track down the buyers, try to recover what we can. What we can't find, we'll replace with pieces that honor the original intention. And the rent, she whispered. Instead of paying me back rent, you'll pay forward. We'll set up a foundation in Grandma's name. The house will host literary events and the library once we restore it. The gardens will be replanted and open for community education. The money you would have paid in rent will go to maintaining these programs. Dad cleared his throat. We'll contribute too. We should have been paying more attention, should have protected Mom's legacy better. And where will I live? Rebecca asked. I smiled slightly. There's a small apartment available in my building. The rent is reasonable, and it comes with a built-in reminder of what happens when you take things for granted. Ms. Chen cleared her throat. Actually, that brings us to Mrs. Mitchell's final instructions. She opened the envelope and pulled out another document. She left a small cottage on the estate property to Rebecca, the gardener's house, on a condition that she work with Emma to restore and maintain the main house and grounds. Rebecca's eyes widened. The cottage? But it's tiny. It's bigger than my apartment, I pointed out. And it's a chance to prove to yourself and everyone else that you've learned from this experience. There's more, Ms. Chen added. Mrs. Mitchell set up a trust to fund the restoration and maintenance of the estate, but it comes with conditions. The house must remain in the family. It must be preserved as a historical property, and most importantly, it must be managed jointly by both sisters, with all major decisions requiring mutual agreement. I looked at Rebecca. Think you can handle having me as a partner? She wiped her eyes, smearing her mascara further. After everything I did, you'd still work with me. Grandma's final test wasn't just for me, I said gently. It was for all of us. To see if we could learn from our mistakes. To see if we could rebuild not just the house, but our relationships. Mom stood up suddenly and pulled both Rebecca and me into a tight hug. Your grandmother would be so proud right now. That was 6 months ago. The restoration of Grandma Rose's estate is well underway. We've managed to track down and recover about half of the library's books, and rare book dealers are helping us find suitable replacements for the others. The rose garden is being replanted with cuttings from heritage gardens across the country. Rebecca has settled into the cottage, though she complains about the size at least once a week. But she's thrown herself into the restoration project with surprising enthusiasm, especially the library. Turns out she actually does like reading when she gives it a chance. Mom and Dad have become regular visitors, helping with the restoration and sharing stories about the house's history that we'd never heard before. Last week, Dad found a box of Grandma's old photographs in the attic, including pictures of the gardens in their original glory. We're using them as reference for the replanting. The first literary event in the restored library is scheduled for next month, a reading program for local children. We're starting with Jane Austen, of course. Grandma would have loved that. Yesterday, I finally moved into the main house, into Grandma's old room. As I was unpacking, I found a letter she hidden in the antique desk drawer, dated just before she went into the nursing home. My dearest Emma, it read, "By now you've faced my final test and I hope understood its true purpose. The house, the books, the roses, they're all just things. Beautiful, precious things, but still just things. The real inheritance I wanted to leave you was the wisdom to know the difference between possessing something and preserving it, between owning and belonging, between power and responsibility. You and Rebecca are so different, yet you each have qualities the other needs. She has vision and drive but needs your steadiness and respect for tradition. You have wisdom and patience but could use some of her spark and ability to embrace change. Together, you could make something remarkable of this old house and its legacy. That's why my final test wasn't really about punishment or revenge. It was about redemption, about giving each of you the chance to become better versions of yourselves. Because that's what family does. We hold each other accountable, but we also hold out hope for each other's growth. Take care of the house, my darling, but more importantly, take care of each other. That's the greatest legacy I could hope to leave. All my love, Grandma Rose." I sat at the desk for a long time after reading the letter, listening to the sounds of Rebecca directing the garden restoration crew outside. She's still bossy, still prone to grand gestures and quick decisions, but she's learning. We both are. This morning, she brought me coffee in Grandma's old china cups, pieces she'd somehow tracked down and repurchased from their buyer. "I found the rest of the set too," she said, uncharacteristically shy. "Thought we could use them for the literary events." I smiled, remembering all the times Grandma had served us tea in these cups, teaching us about family history between sips. That's perfect. Want to help me go through some more of her letters? There might be other clues about the house's history. Rebecca settled into the window seat, her favorite spot when we were kids. You know what? I really would. And somewhere, I'm sure, Grandma Rose was smiling.